What's up, guys? Diego from SGN, and I'm bringing you a new show called This Week in Sports, where I'm going to be breaking down all the big news stories throughout the week in sports. And I want to be very clear. I'm only going to be talking about the sports that I enjoy, the sports that I like, and the sports that I have enough knowledge on to really be able to be commenting on what goes on without actually sounding like an absolute moron. And of course, you might think I do sound like a moron, and that's okay, because I probably am. However, these are all sports that I have enough knowledge in to feel comfortable talking about. And the first I want to talk about this week is the UFC 227. All right, I only watched the last 3 fights on the card because for me, it was like 5:30 in the morning more or less, when Cub Swanson took on Renato Moicano. And that was a big win for Renato, making a name for himself against a really, really important fighter. Somebody who over the years has had title shots, and he's pretty much always been more or less in the top 5 of that division. So hats off to him for getting the win and getting himself more or less towards the title contention, because Cub Swanson was one of those guys who was pretty much always 1 or 2 wins away from having a title shot. So big win for him. Hats off to him for that, and a nice little finish there as well. Rock and Cub Swanson and getting a nice submission to end the fight. Moving on to the co-main and main event, we had Demetrious Johnson taking on Henry Cejudo in what turned out to be a historical fight. Because every time Demetrious Johnson has fought over the past few fights, it's been historical because he was always moving closer and closer to reaching the record of most title defenses most consecutive title defenses, in UFC history. He finally passed Anderson Silva and reached 12, but of course, unfortunately for him, the time has come for his title reign to end, and Henry Cejudo put on really a once-in-a-lifetime performance to be able to defeat Demetrious Johnson, because he didn't just go out there and, maybe starch Demetrious Johnson early on and get lucky. He actually was able to, of course, win the last 2 rounds, but he was also able to maintain himself in the fight. He was improved drastically in striking. He got way better being able to hold Demetrious down, because in the first fight, of course, it ended in like 2 minutes or something like that, and he got pretty much brutalized by a devastating knee in the clinch. And for him to be able to be in the same exact position, have understood what he did wrong, and be able to adapt and fix with the mistakes that he made was really impressive, because it hasn't been that long. It's only been like, a year and a half, 2 years, maybe a little bit more. But regardless, he did a very good job of finding out what was wrong and fixing it. Of course, on the feet, he even said himself, he got hurt very early on by the leg kick of Demetrious Johnson and had to fight southpaw. And apparently, that's what actually allowed him to find better timing, allowed him to find better range awareness, and it actually led him to being pretty dominant on the feet. I'm not going to say he was dominant, but he was pretty solid. He won quite a few of the exchanges. By the end of the 3rd round, I was thinking to myself, he's doing a very, very good job of, and he's possibly on the cusp of winning this fight. Once he won the 4th run, I was figuring, okay, the momentum is on his side, and he'd probably win the last 2 rounds. So if he can just land one big shot, then it is absolutely guaranteed it's going to be his fight. And realistically, it was a split decision, and it was a very close fight. It was a very good fight of the night. And overall, I have to say, I can't be upset about the decision. I actually agree with the decision. I have seen a few people saying that they thought Demetrious won, but realistically, it could have gone either way. It really could have gone either way. I think Demetrious had more strikes landed. I think Demetrious said, in his opinion, some of the judges don't understand how to count leg kicks, and that's okay. I mean, I do agree that leg kicks should probably be given a little bit more respect, considering how important they've been lately in fights, especially with calf kicks. But at the end of the day, I think that Henry Cejudo did enough to be able to secure himself that win. And hats off to him for ending of course, the most impressive title run of all time, having defended his title 12 times. But not only that, but also defeating a guy who had just beaten him 2 years earlier and doing it in very solid fashion. So Henry Cejudo, if they do have an immediate rematch, but of course Demetrious Johnson did tear his LCL and apparently has a broken foot, he thinks. So who knows how long he's going to be out for? We're going to see what happens there. He might have to rematch Joseph Benavidez first. Henry Cejudo might have to rematch Joseph Benavidez and see how that goes. Maybe even if Dana White decides to do it, if Dominic Cruz is for some reason hurt, maybe have him move up and take on TJ Dillashaw for the bantamweight title. Either way, it's a very fun fight. Either way, whatever happens, it should be an interesting thing to see how far Henry Cejudo can go, and if he can actually beat Demetrious Johnson for a second time. Talking about the main event, we had TJ Dillashaw in a grudge match versus Cody Garbrandt in a fight that was really, really, I think, under the radar. The first one had so much hatred behind it, so everybody was really interested to see who was going to win. TJ Dillashaw was hated by just about everybody because of the whole snake in the grass situation. Him leaving Team Alpha Male was one of the most beloved gyms in all of mixed martial arts. And then, of course, Cody Garbrandt, let's just be real, he's kind of a dickhead. He seems like he's an absolute moron, but people were on his side because, of course, he was Uriah Faber's buddy. But I think that as time went on during the tough show that they coached, more and more people were starting to lean towards TJ, because you could really see that Cody Garbrandt was kind of like a brainless moron who just goes out there and he just says a lot of stupid stuff. And listen, I know Cody Garbrandt could beat my ass, so of course if he does see me in the streets and like he is offended by that for some reason, then of course I'll take my lumps essentially. But I think that just most people can agree he seems like a moron. And I think that kind of backfired on him in not just the first fight, but also in the second fight. In the first fight, obviously, he hurt TJ badly, and he was kind of close to doing a lot of damage there, possibly even getting the finish. But TJ did a very good job of rallying back and then finished him. I think it was in the second round. In this fight, there was one point where he hit TJ and it looked like he kind of stunned him a little bit, and then he pointed to get back in the center of the octagon when he probably could have gone on there and tried to push forward. I'm not saying that TJ was, dazed like badly or anything like that. He was even anywhere near close to rocking him really badly and maybe being able to finish him. But still, instead of like pointing to your feet and saying getting back in the middle of the octagon, why don't you go and try to pressure him and possibly land another big shot? And that kind of gave TJ, I think, the opening to recover 100%, even though he wasn't even that hurt maybe. But regardless, he gave him that little inch of space to get back. And then, of course, he was throwing these stupid hooks, these stupid right hooks that were leaving his chin completely exposed. And unlike TJ, he wasn't ducking down whenever he would finish throwing a punch. TJ was using very solid head movement, and that was what led him to rock him the first time. Of course, that was that exchange, and then Cody managed to recover a little bit, but then he threw another stupid shot. TJ ducked under it perfectly, landed a big one, and from then you could just see that Cody was just absolutely reeling. He was pretty much on. He was on Queer Street, essentially. He was about to get finished, and then TJ landed some big shots against the cage and landed a giant knee that put him down, and Cody was asking for Herb Dean at the end of the fight, once it was already stopped. He was saying, you got to let things go. But realistically, Herb Dean was in a situation there where either he stops it and the fighter's going to complain that maybe it was a little bit early, or you're going to have him letting it go a little bit longer. He's going to take 3 or 4 really, really bad shots. He's going to have probably a few years taken off of his life in certain situations if the shots are big enough, if TJ has absolutely no mercy, which we have seen he has no mercy because he's that competitive and he had that much disdain for Cody. He was going to land some huge shots and really hurt him. So I think that Herb Dean made, without a doubt, the right decision of stopping the fight when he did, and realistically saving Cody Garbrandt for just further brain damage that he absolutely didn't need. And you never know. Cody Garbrandt might get himself back into a title contention. We'll see. When he did fight Dominic Cruz and take the title from him, Dominic was having a really bad time with plantar fasciitis. I think that's why you say it. Where essentially, if you're a normal human being, you can barely even walk. But if you're Dominic Cruz, an absolute badass mixed martial artist, then he was able to fight through that and be able to go 25 rounds against a very tough dude. So was Dominic Cruz, compromised to a point where maybe that was why he lost the fight? Well, I don't know. I would like to see Dominic Cruz now fight for the title, and then maybe Cody Garbrandt fights somebody who's a little bit lower, and then maybe around 8th or something like that, get himself a nice little win. Maybe even take on Sun Sao, who's another guy who is always on the cusp of a title shot, who is just kind of never gets the credit he deserves for how good he is. He's a very good fighter, but he just never really gets the credit he deserves, and possibly a win against Cody Garbrandt would put him against whoever the winner of between Dominic Cruz or TJ Dillashaw, or if there's for some reason a super fight between Dillashaw and Henry Cejudo, maybe a Sun Sao versus Garbrandt could decide who's the winner after Dominic Cruz gets a shot. Regardless, I think that 135 with TJ at the helm, it's got a lot of possibilities there. It's going to be a fun division for the years to come, and there's plenty of things to look forward to there. And of course, I would love to see TJ Dillashaw eventually take on Demetrius Johnson, regardless of what happens. If DJ decides to move up, or for some reason they get to listen, I don't want to cut down to 125, even though I don't think he really cuts anything at all for the most part. He just wants to go up to 135, test himself against TJ Dillashaw, or maybe TJ goes down. Who knows? There's plenty of fights for that, the 4 guys that took place in the co-main and main event of UFC 227. Sorry. And the next thing I want to talk about is the Community Shield match today between Manchester City and Chelsea. And of course, this game just kind of confirmed what we already know. In other words, that Manchester City are as strong as ever. Having added Riyad Mahrez and having only gotten rid of Yaya Toure for the most part, there's a very, very dangerous team. All right, this is realistically a team that needs to be aiming for a Champions League final. All right, they need to be aiming that high because they have the players, they have the manager, and after having Pep Guardiola for 2 years now, this is really when they need to make their push. It's pretty much now or never with the team, with the players they have, because they have a few of them that are getting older. I'm not gonna say that they're like a team that's gonna end within 2 years. They're not that old, but they are a team that needs to be pushing now. This is it. This is where they need to be pushing for a Champions League final spot. And if they don't reach it now, they might never reach it because they have so many amazing players and they have a great manager, possibly one of the best managers in the world, if not the best. So It is now or never. And of course, Chelsea, look, all right, I'm not gonna blame them too much for having a bad game, because realistically, they had a really poor performance. I think at one point there was like 15 shots for City and 4 shots for Chelsea. I don't think that was like the end stats, but regardless, it was that level of domination for Manchester City. And realistically, they could have scored a lot more. And Chelsea's defense was kind of reeling, but I'm not going to give him too much hate for it, because Mauricio Sarri did only sign for Chelsea, what was it, like 2 or 3 weeks ago? I think it was 2.5 weeks at most. So realistically, he's only been there for a few matches in preseason, and he's only had the players he's had for a little bit, because a lot of them were on vacation, and a lot of them haven't come back from the World Cup. So I'm not going to hate on him too much. Of course, I don't think that Chelsea are going to be competing for the Premier League title, despite the fact that a lot of people think that they are going to be the main title rivals for Man City, but I think they're going to finish 3rd this season. But regardless, I think that they're still going to improve dramatically over the next couple weeks, and that's where we're really going to start to see what Chelsea's going to look like under Mauricio Sarri. So, of course, City are, once again, Community Shield champions. Hats off for them for that. But hopefully this season won't be as successful as it was last season for the citizens. Moving on to the next thing I want to talk about, it is LeBron James, who is probably the best athlete of all time. Not just in terms of being an amazing athlete on court, but I mean like being an actual amazing human being. He's probably the best human being athlete of all time, because this guy, he does a lot of things for charity. He's always been very outspoken about black rights. He's always been very outspoken about just human rights in general. And all of a sudden, he's opening up a school, and I think it's Akron, Ohio, his hometown, for underprivileged kids. And not only is he opening a school that they can go to, he's actually going to be paying tuition for any kid that graduates there to go to university. Like, that's amazing. Like, what other athlete are you seeing out there who is still playing or still doing whatever they do, that's doing this much for kids? Like, there's just nobody out there doing this stuff. And LeBron James, anybody who still hates this guy, like, I can get like people who hated him from a sports point of view for going to Miami and things of that nature. But if you hate him as a person, then clearly you have something wrong with you. Because if you hate LeBron James, you're just, I don't know what the hell you could possibly hate about him. He's a great guy. He goes out there and he gives his all every single game. I think he played 82 games last season, which is unheard of for a guy who's played like how many years now? Like 15 years in the NBA, 16 years in the NBA. That's unheard of, to play 82 games after so many years in the NBA. And at the high level, he's still playing them. I mean, he's not just an amazing athlete, probably one of the best athletes, if not the best athlete. In my opinion, it's between him and Cristiano Ronaldo for the best athletes in the world. He's definitely, humanitarian point of view, without a doubt, the best athlete possibly of all time. I mean, just an amazing person. And hats off to LeBron James. I absolutely hope that he does reach at least 2 more rings. I hope so, because based on what he's done on the court and off the court, he absolutely deserves to be given credit among the greatest basketball players of all time, because there are still a lot of people who don't give him that credit. There are still a lot of people who think that he's outside of the top 5 best basketball players of all time. I think you're insane. I'm not this amazing connoisseur of basketball, but based on what he's done and based on what he does also off the court, he has to be given recognition. Anybody who hates him, just fuck off. Moving into the last thing I want to talk about, it is, of course, the big change, a big trade deal that happened in football, which is Leonardo Bonucci going to Juventus in exchange for Gonzalo Higuain and Caldara, who is a very young, very talented center back who was realistically touted to be possibly one of the best Italian center backs for the years to come. And Juventus, in my opinion, did take the dick in this trade. Because, listen, Bonucci, 31 years old, still a great defender, and center backs do tend to age slower. And he might still have a couple years of his prime, maybe even 3 years in his prime. But here's the thing. All right, Caldara is a player that was still going to guarantee you for years to come. After what he did for Atalanta, he was going to guarantee you solid minutes. Like, he was always going to be able to. I'm not going to say he's going to be like a possibly Ballon d'Or player. I'm not going to say he was going to be a starter for Real Madrid. But for Juventus, he was going to be almost guaranteed to be replacing Chiellini. He was going to be guaranteed to replace Barzagli. He was going to be a very important player for Juventus in years to come. Now, something may have happened, like backstage, where Juventus decided he was excess. He wasn't really required anymore, or maybe they decided that he simply wasn't good enough. But based on what we saw him do at Atalanta over the past couple seasons, it really seemed like they probably took the dick in this trade, because, of course, it's one thing to lose Caldara, who is a guy who, yes, he's rated up around 40 million right now, but he's a guy who could have taken a huge boom in his value in the next couple of years, considering how weird the transfer market is. But it's also another thing to give away Gonzalo Higuain in the same trade. Like, you gotta be kidding me. And of course, I think Juventus are getting 18 million out of Milan for the first year, and then possibly 32 million euro if they want to keep him, if they want to officially buy him next season. But Milan don't necessarily have to do that. So essentially, Juventus are giving away Gonzalo Higuain for 18 million euro. And people might be saying, listen, that's a lot of money for a 1-year loan deal. And it is. But we're talking about a guy who's going to make Milan exponentially better, right? What's a big thing they've been lacking over the past few years? Of course, they had a bad defense, and Bonucci wasn't able to fix that, even though Bonucci is one of the best defenders in the world. So that does show that they have some defensive weaknesses. However, they're going to be getting a great striker. They're going to be getting a striker who's going to guarantee them at least 25 goals a season, at least. And now that he's going to be the focal point at Milan, because at Juventus he had Dybala, he had Mandzukic, he had a lot of great players around him, so to where he wasn't going to be the main focus. Everybody gets their part in the team. Everybody has their part. Everybody does what they do. Whereas in Milan, the team isn't that great, so everybody's going to be playing around him. So he's going to be scoring a lot of goals. I don't know if he's going to score as many as he did with Napoli, but that season when he hit like around 50. But I do think that he will be, doing a lot better than he did over the past couple years with Juventus, just in terms of goal yields. I think he's going to score around 30, maybe even 35. And that's going to be very, very big for Milan possibly getting towards the Champions League. And if they can do that, they can maybe get themselves out of the financial fair play issues. That means that they can have more money, they can acquire better players, and that's a big issue for Juventus moving forward, because Milan are a team with amazing history, and you can't put that aside. You can't deny them. You can't deny the fact that if they can get themselves out of this tough situation financially, they're going to be a very tough team to deal with over the next few years if they can start acquiring players. So in my opinion, Juventus really kind of screwed themselves over because they looked at things from a short term instead of looking at things over the next 5 years. Because Bonucci, if he doesn't give them the Champions League, if him and Ronaldo don't give them the Champions League, then that was a very big mistake in my opinion, in terms of just losing a very solid young center back in exchange for a center back who's towards the end of his prime and is probably going to bite them in the ass in this situation, because we're not talking about a guy like Bonucci who left because Juventus didn't want him anymore. We're talking about a guy who slapped Dybala in the locker room at halftime of the Champions League final in a game that they were tying 1-1. A game where they were still very much in it. So that was a huge mistake in my opinion. That was just a dickhead move to a next level that we didn't expect Bonucci to do. We're talking about a guy who talked a lot of shit about Juventus, who was a club that gave him over a month off when his son was having some problems, when his child was having problems. They gave him, free medical assistance for his child, gave him a month off without having to do anything. They treated him like a king, essentially. They treated him as well as you could possibly treat a player. Then what does he do? He goes and he talks a bunch of shit about them. He forces his exit to be signed by Milan, and he was their captain. After scoring a goal at the Juventus Stadium, he went over there. He did his little wash your mouth celebration, which is garbage, by the way. He did that under Juventus's, hooligans area. That's where their ultra are. So that just shows that the guy didn't respect the club. And in my opinion, when somebody does that to you, you simply, in good conscience, for your fans, you can't be doing that type of stuff. If for some reason United win, I don't know, they signed Carlos Tevez right after he went to City, I would have been pissed because, of course, Carlos Tevez wasn't there for very long, but regardless, the fans loved him. We sang his name constantly. He was a guy that we all adored because he put in a big effort, and of course, Raiola and all that stuff backfired on him, and of course, Carlos Tevez being a money-grabbing whore, as the chant says, he fucked up and he did a bunch of stupid stuff. He went to City, he did a bunch of stupid stuff there. So, and then he went to Boca Juniors and did a bunch of stupid stuff there, threatening to go to China. He just did a bunch of stupid shit. He's not the type of footballer that deserves your love. That's what I'm getting at. And Bonucci, I kind of put him in the same type of situation. Because, of course, now that he realized that with Milan, he's not going to win shit. And now that Cristiano Ronaldo's at Juventus, he probably begged himself to get back to where he allegedly belongs. So, of course, I get why. I get Juventus' reasoning. They want a center back that's going to be able to dominate them, that's going to dominate Europe, who knows the system. He's going to be able to be a leader in the Champions League squad. I get their reasoning there, but I also think when somebody does that and acts like that towards you and towards your fan base, you just got to tell that guy to fuck off. I don't give a shit how much he's going to improve your team. And realistically, like I said, I think this is a move that's probably pretty solid, kind of solid in the short term, but in the long run, I think this kind of is going to backfire on him pretty badly with Higuain just kind of being there. He's going to score a bunch of goals in Serie A. It's going to kind of backfire on there. I don't think that Milan are going to be a threat for the title, but regardless, I think that moving forward, it's going to be a bad deal for Juventus in terms of losing a young talent and using one of the best strikers in the world in Gonzalo Higuain. I want you to let me know in the comment section down below what you think of all the topics I mentioned. What do you think about Juventus' trade? What do you think about LeBron James? What do you think about the Community Shield match? What does this mean for Chelsea? And do you think that City are going to be able to repeat what they did last season and dominate so badly? And what do you think, of course, about the UFC fights from last night? If you enjoyed the video, please smash the like button, subscribe to the channel, and share the video. And also, if you want to, hit the notification bell, that way you're notified every time a video comes out, which is pretty much the only way that YouTube will give me any credit for putting out these videos. Once again, guys, thank you so much, especially to every single one of my subscribers. I will see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.